These are only to assist you in listening to the tape, but your ears are the final judge of what is actually on the tape, hearing it yourselves. Just use these to follow along.
I believe people are prepared to stipulate that before the close of the case.
The lawyers will keep working at it, but prepare them. Okay. That's why we caution you to listen to the tape as the evidence of the conversation.
Your Honor, I have this turned up as high as it can go, but as the court knows, it's not perfect.
Okay.
For months and months and months, I would have to listen to my mother crying in the house. I would come home, my mother would be crying upstairs, and I would just be watching TV downstairs, and I would just hear the sobbing, and I couldn't go up and say what was wrong. And I would, because I didn't have that kind of relationship. I just never, I wish I had. And I look back on it now, and I wish I had that kind of relationship. But I remember when we first moved out and we were living in the condominium, I would hear right through the wall, and I would listen about how they were about to have a divorce, and how my dad was telling my mom that they should not have a divorce. And I was just, that year, we were just going right through it, and from listening to her, she wasn't strong enough. What year was that? It was the year we first moved out.
That was just a few years ago.
Yeah, it was 1987.
Well, when you ended up killing your mom, did you feel like you were sparing her? I mean, I know she was horribly depressed, and she was totally dominated by your dad. She was like a shell of the person. She had no identity or strength left anymore. You had been, I know that you had been responding to her as I think almost like a person who has become sort of pitiful. Yeah, that's a strong word, but is that how you felt?
Well, no, we were doing almost to my mom's case something that first of all, there was no way, never could she live without my father.
That was something that we had to really, it was a big thing holding us back from killing my father, is that we thought that we would just kill Dad and eliminate the father. And see, the first step, when I found out the first suicide note, and then it got worse and worse, but whether, okay, I'll now support my mother, and Eric and I decided we would rally behind my mother instead of my father, who could take care of himself, because he would understand, he would probably want us to rally against for my mother, because all along his view was, you protect your mother, she's your mother, you only have one mother. I may be your father, but your father is not as close to you as your mother. And that was his view. And even though I was never as close to my mother as Eric in the early years, and I sort of rallied behind my dad because we had more in common and so on. But so I decided, okay, I'm going to rally behind my mother. And I had a conversation with her. I wrote her a long letter saying if she ever wanted to leave Dad and whatever, she could move to Princeton. I'd live with her. She wouldn't be alone. There'd be no problems. There wouldn't be any big fight over custody of the children. We'd go with her if she wanted, and visit back and forth, whatever she wanted. And that didn't work because she cut me short immediately. There was no discussion. It was, Lyle, you're fabricating this. I started out by not wanting to really deal with her problems. I didn't want to know I found the note. It wouldn't be as effective. So I started to go through all the things that aggravated me about Dad and how he was suppressing myself and all these things, and he kept saying, no, she wouldn't even let me do that. She was, this is something you're fabricating. This, you know that really you bring up a lot of this upon yourself, Lyle. You don't realize this, and you don't realize that. And it was just all untrue. She was the worst psychologist ever. She was not, in my opinion, a good open mother like she wanted to be. I felt that at that point she was so tainted by the fact that things were so horrible between her and Dad that she couldn't come out and say, you know, you're right, I'm having the same problems with my husband that you're having with your father, and maybe we should talk about it like a mother should. Even just out of curiosity of wanting to discuss something. She would rather discuss my girlfriend than my relationship with my father. Mm-hmm. And she was definitely with Dad on that issue. And so it was a dead issue within 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about it. Nope, you're wrong. You're overreacting. If you want to leave the family and you want to go off on your own, fine.
You had no one to really talk with us about it, except Eric.
Except Eric. And I sort of just said, all right, fine. She doesn't want to get divorced. Things seemed to almost get better. And then all of a sudden they just turned for the worse. And I think they turned for the worse after she found out that she had made a decision that she couldn't take it anymore and that Dad didn't love her anymore. And
That's the affair?
I believe it was after she found out about one of the affairs, like the main affair, that it had been 8 years long or whatever, or maybe after she found out there had been more than one. It was some point where she just decided, boom, no way did he ever love me. I was wrong thinking that he loved me and he was just doing this because he needed to. And at this point, I had stopped trying to help her divorce, so she didn't have my support anymore. I was, gradually being separated from her because she was no longer someone I could talk to about anything. Anything I talked to her about, I would talk to your father.
Did she actually get angry for bringing up stuff that was negative?
She was very cold. My mother was always very good in stressful situations. Very calm. This was obviously something that was an extreme stress for her. If Eric would have walked in the room when she was crying, or when I did, frequently, she would stop crying. I won't talk about it. It's my own problem. Blah, blah, blah.
She wouldn't let you in, though?
No, very matter of fact also about stressful things, which would mean if I started saying, which I would do would be to try to get her emotional and get her emotions out. Hey, I'm with you. I think we should leave Dad. He's crazy. He's doing this and this to you. It's obvious. He's doing this to me. Her reaction is, no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I think you're overreacting, Lyle. Here's all the things that Lyle, he bought you this car. He wanted you to do this. He wanted you to do that. He's a loving father. I don't know what you're talking about. I think we should stop thinking about it.
How angry was that?
And, what?
How angry was that?
To me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was extremely angering to me because she was putting me in a position to defend the things that my father was doing to me, and that wasn't even supposed to be the issue. It was the things that I had to get past first, the things he was doing to me, to get to the things he was doing to her, and there was just no way.
You couldn't even get her to acknowledge that he was doing anything to her or to you. I mean, she wouldn't even, you were trying to protect her, and you were trying to say, Mom, we know what he's doing, and you were trying to tell her that he was doing the same thing to you and to her and to Eric, and she wouldn't acknowledge he was doing any of it and turned it around and actually blamed you as if you were an ingrate.
Right.
And she basically invalidated all of your perceptions and everything that you knew that was going on. She told you wasn't happening, got angry at you, blamed you, turned on you, and you ended up trying to protect her and getting punished and rejected, and as a person again told you were a bad guy, when really what you were trying to do is save her from what your dad was doing to you and your mom. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
That's it. And I didn't try as much as I wished I would have tried. I didn't know a lot of it. I found out a lot of it later on. I found out more and more and more. And in my opinion, she got worse and worse and worse. And but for a while, I was traveling so much, I was away from the picture. I'd only hear about it from Eric. Oh, my mom freaked out about this. Oh, Mom burst out crying about this. And mentioned Louisa again, and couldn't trust Dad here or there. And my reaction is, I don't want to be involved. It's a situation I can't help. And the alcohol, the drugs she would bring up to me, it was a sign that it was getting worse. And she would finally come to me and go, you don't understand how much stress I'm under. I take 13 pills a day, I drink, be careful about this Princeton issue or whatever. I'm not handling it well. I don't want to hear about this or that. And, there was no way I could open up to her about the real issue. I knew that she was seeking help, and I was hoping that it would help. From my girlfriend reading the letters that I found afterwards and before, her conclusion, and seems to be a lot of my relatives' conclusions, is that my mother could possibly have staged the whole thing and killed both of them herself, because she was unable to kill herself, and so she had she just said, okay, kill us at some point. And that's their feeling. I mean, obviously it's my feeling, I don't have, but I could see how they believed that, reading those letters. I kept thinking it over, almost as if it was true, almost as if I was like an instrument of hers in killing herself. That's where we sort of feel like, you mentioned before, that we were doing her and us a favor in putting her out of her misery, really, in that she could kill herself at any moment. And our reaction was, we knew that if she killed herself, my father was in trouble. We would physically not be able to handle that, because she was really a helpless victim. And I saw her going through her own...
I had in my mind that I would be the turning point. If my mother killed herself, I would hate my father for life. And there'd be almost no point about it.
And I didn't know how my mother could live with it because, and I tried not to think about it. Thinking about it was a very painful thing. That's why I don't have dreams about it now, and I don't think about it now. It's a serious sore spot, my mother, and that whole issue, because, you know, even if I think about it for a moment, I say to myself, Dad was having an affair the whole time he was saying he was out late, working, and she was at home bearing the fact that she couldn't be with her husband, they couldn't go to the dinner parties and so on, to take care of his kids and do all the things he wanted her to do, and she worked like a dog doing that, thinking she was helping their relationship for a better time, and then he would come home and say he's tired from working late and therefore didn't want to go to dinner parties, and she would cry about that, but her strength came from the fact that he was doing it for the family and for her, and so she was going to sacrifice, and then she realized that the 20 years of sacrifice was for nothing. He was going around with other women and so on, and that her whole basis for being able to go through it all was really a falsehood, and that I could see how, boom, you want to kill yourself. Can't handle my whole life as a waste. I've wasted all these years. I could have been something. And our feeling, she would tell us about all the things she could have been and done and couldn't, because Dad, she told us, Dad gave me an ultimatum. Take care of the kids and stay home and forget the acting and the hostess job that you were offered and all this other stuff, or I leave. And that was my dad's general feeling when she was crying, which was, hey, you know, I want my life the way I want it. If I have to do things I don't want to do to satisfy the marriage, that's not the way I want to live. We'll go our separate ways. And my feeling was very strong. It's not the way it is. I told him flat out, you know, you make sacrifices in order to have a relationship. You make compromises. It's the whole point of a relationship. You're each not going to get exactly what you want, so you try to come to, you know, you go to a dinner party even if you don't want to because he hasn't been able to go to one and because you've been working with. It was not his feeling at all that he should do that.
How did he respond?
He responded by saying, well, I'm not prepared to do that. My feeling is that you have a relationship, one person controls the show. If I have to do things I don't want to do, even the smallest things, then I don't want to be a part of the relationship.
So it was his way or no way?
It's his way or no way, and he did that, and he was smoking a cigarette, and I remember the scene very well back in Pennington, and I was shocked by the statement, because I realized there if I pursued it, it could lead to a divorce. If I pursued it, you know, his feeling was he would rather have a divorce than work out even a small thing like a dinner party. To me, it was amazing.
He had to have total control, or he wanted a divorce.
Right.
So, and is that...
And he thought that it worked best that way, that that's what kept the relationship going. Was that one person knew that this person was in control, or it was over.
Do you think he believed that, or do you think he needed to have that total control, and she sort of justified it with those kind of statements? How much did you feel that you were killing your dad because of what he was doing to you each, and how much did you feel you were killing your dad in part because of what he did to your mom, and what part was each?
It was not because of what he was doing to me, because I had already decided and had pretty much splintered off from my family, and tried many times. I decided at one point, I don't want another cent, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I tried to be self-supportive. I'm going to marry this girl and go have my own life. And it was my mother actually telling me, okay, you do that, but it's not because of what your father is doing. I want you to know that. That would anger me and bring me back in to help her out, because I realized she was so disillusioned and fucked up over the whole thing that she would actually think that. If she would have just said, you know, I realize it's really strenuous, your dad is really doing all these things, it's terrible, I agree with you, maybe you should go off and do your own thing, it would have been a lot easier for me to do it. I needed her agreement that there was a problem, and she never gave it, was none. And I didn't think about it for a long time until Eric and I would get together and we would share what was happening in the family. And it was obvious my mother was deteriorating. We didn't want to get to a point where my mother killed herself and my father, we were left to deal with my father. That would be too hard on us almost, because, you know, I wouldn't want to, it would be hard on my father, and yet I couldn't let him get away with this. With what I would consider a murder, that there was no way anyone would ever find out about. Mm-hmm. And so, for my mother's sake, I thought that we did it. We had to come, like I was saying before, we had to make a decision. It was one of the harder ones. And it was a separate issue. Okay, these are the reasons my father should be killed. There's no question. What he's doing is impossible to live with for myself and for myself based on what he's doing to my mother. And
What were the things that he was doing? It's obvious to me that he was doing all kinds of stuff, from totally controlling everybody in the family, being completely cold-blooded about his decisions, considering everyone as sort of an instrument of his own will. And there's a lot of stuff that your dad was doing, including talking about disinheriting you, or actually having said that he did disinherit you, I guess, at a couple of points.
Well, that didn't enter into it too much, because I felt like Eric and I could handle it, and he would expect us to handle it, and we would, we were strong, and I still felt he was an ideal father for the longest time, because I felt like our dad can't be with us, and he's strong, he's overpowering, but he gives us advice. Fathers who are friends to their sons, and in his words, like Wimpy, don't give. And he teaches us to be a man, and almost that he had raised us to be able to handle doing this thing that was necessary, and that we could deal with it better than any other 18 or 21-year-old in the country. Because he had trained us like basic training. My 21 years was a basic training course.
To do what?
On how to survive, and how to do what was necessary. And
To survive by living without him, or by telling him to leave?
by living without him. And that,
Because you would never have lived with him anyway. I mean, you never had that father-son closeness anyway. There's no. He had trained you mainly by being a disciplinarian and being tough, not by having a loving bond with you.
exactly.
Or to survive without having...
I felt a bond, though. I felt like I would go back and forth as to whether I was close to my mother or my father. When I really started to see my mother's problems, I'd be much closer to her. I hate my father. And then I'd get away from that, and when he had the problem, the heart condition and so on, I went in and I watched the Super Bowl with him, and we were close. And after the Calabasas issue, he cried, and we were together, and we were close. It was the first time he ever cried in front of me, and he felt much more uncomfortable. I used to feel very uncomfortable and cry whenever he told me he loved me, because it was an unusual thing, and I couldn't handle it. And because we were supposed to be man to man, he would say that. He would say it matter-of-factly with no emotion, and it bothered the shit out of him. And I could not talk to him about anything concerning anything emotional without getting too emotional myself. And then it changed, and he became the one that, as I became more comfortable with it, I could bring up the fact, I love you and I'm doing this for this, and he could not handle it. Couldn't talk to me about it, couldn't want to deal with anything like that, because it became a genuine emotion. If I expressed a genuine emotion, he would close up, and it would have hurt him. Like it would be a chink in his armor. He couldn't withstand it, and he cried after the Calabasas issue, after I said that, Eric, no, very sorry, no deal, and I'm sorry for all that trouble that you were caused through this whole issue. And he cried, and he felt for everything, and I think he cried a lot after the Princeton issue. And I came to him and said this and that. But with me, it was very cold. That crying I never saw. He would be very upset if I saw him crying or anything. Then don't cry. And so it came down to that decision, and we decided that my mother could not live without my father. And it was sort of nice for me to hear my cousin Sylvia.
Why did your dad have to die? I know from your mom why he had to die. How about for the two of you? What? It's clear to me how much he totally controlled the two of you, and it's also clear he was when he talked about you when you weren't here, he was very he was derogating about both of you in different ways. I mean, he would be judgmental of you in one way and judgmental of you, Eric, in another way. And it was real clear that at the same time he was saying he expected you, quote, to be men, that he was treating you as if you were disappointments and that you weren't strong enough. And that you were weak in one way and you were weak in another way. And I don't know if that came across, and if that was part of what you felt in your relationship with him, that you could never be good enough, you could never do enough.
Sure. He even told Eric that the Calabasas issue and the way he handled it terribly. If he were in charge of it, he could have handled it way better than Eric. He made all kinds of mistakes, and you don't know how to do that either.
And so it wasn't even so much what you did, it was more that you were stupid in how you did it. You did it in an inferior and incompetent way.
But I still don't think it had anything to do with killing him. It had nothing to do with us. It had to do with me realizing a number of things that all culminated, which was and could have culminated at any point. And it was just a question of Eric and I getting together and somebody bringing it up and us realizing the value in it, which was my father had the dream of now going into politics and was becoming a parent, and my mother would not be able to handle that. She had expressed over and over again how that would be the worst thing in the world for their relationship. What she wanted was for him to get away from his business and his dictatorship life with business and stressed out and all this other thing, and just sort of retire with her and be with her and get to know her. And if he went into politics, she would again be that shell of a showcase for him, and he would be boom, 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 be very busy, be time-consuming, and that would be his new love, politics instead of business, instead of her.
Instead of an affair.
And it would be his sort of affair, really. He had almost said, I felt like, and now I feel like, he had given up women and taken up politics. It was his new affair, just something that would be his passion. His passion is like, very passionate man, but not with her. She had expressed in her letters there was no passion. And yet, on the outside, everyone thought that their relationship was all passion, all consuming. And it was crazy. But my feeling was that with him deciding to enter into politics, it was her doom. It was over. There was no escape. And Eric and I were he was on the verge of going to UCLA.
No escape from what? When you say no escape from what?
No escape from being separated from my dad in an environment, or in a relationship where she had no identity. And she was too public. She was being battered, and she at least felt comfortable in Princeton, New Jersey, and he knew that. And she had her friends, and she had a bonding and a relationship, and she was busy. And he took her out of that and brought her to California, and Eric and I knew it was devastating for her. I mean, it was really her death there. And if he went into politics, it would be another one. And it was just one blow after another, because moving to California was just the worst thing in the world, and he knew it. And
for him, for her,
for her. For him, it was great. He didn't care. It was just continuation of his career and this and that. And his wife was obviously going to go with him. There was no question. He made a thing where he would fly back and forth to New Jersey because he realized that this was a serious thing. His wife might not be able to handle this. I think he realized that. It was obvious, but he was very careful. Kitty, you're going to love it here. Come on. And Kitty was very sincere about the fact, I don't even know why she left. If there was a time for a divorce, that would be the best time to pursue it, because she had a real bond there. It was a real emotional breakup with that community and her. And she had never had a friend out here, had one friend or whatever, and never really saw her that much. And she never inquired into tennis lessons or leagues or community things or nothing. She got involved in this house that Dad was building, and that was it.
We're trying to push her into those kind of things, and for something she just...
And she would say, no, there's not enough money, I have to spend it on the kids.
Yeah, push her into,
She believed.
community activities. Don't you think she was probably too depressed and felt too powerless?
She was too depressed, and yet but she also, and it's an interesting thing Eric just brought up, she believed, Dad had her convinced, and it was an amazing day when this happened, that they had no money. That he had her convinced that they were poor, and that she could literally not afford to take tennis lessons and do different things for herself and buy herself nice stuff and never get a leather jacket for a couple $100. I was buying leather $100 jackets on the allowance I was getting easily, and she said she couldn't afford one. She wished she could get one. And I remember a day when I said, come on, Mom, because I had bought something, how can you say I can't afford this when Dad just got a stock bonus worth $6 million, and she said that she had no, and his salary is $1.3 million, and she had no idea. She said, "What stock? What do you mean his salary is $300,000 or whatever it was?"
He totally controlled her.
And she said, "How do you know that? That's not true." And because we're cash poor. And I was shocked, and I said I knew it because I worked with the company, and it was right in the stock letter, which I didn't read, that said he got this much stock, and sure, his salary was $300,000, $500,000, but his bonus every year was $850. No idea. She had no idea. And she did know about the life insurance thing. That came afterwards. So I realized that he was withholding tremendous amount of financial information for her. My feeling then was, well, it's obviously in case they get a divorce, he doesn't want to know her to know what he's worth. But that enabled her to never buy anything, never do anything creative like that.
You see, when you said that, I think you're right about that, but there's another part of it, which is it also enabled him, again, to never allow her to have, I mean, your father was a totally controlling man, which meant that in the relationship, like you said, he needed to make all decisions. He needed to have her completely subservient. He needed to take all the will out of her, all the identity out of her, so that she was basically nothing but an extension of him and a shell of a person. So one way of controlling somebody so that they never develop any sense of identity, you tell them they have no money, they can't buy things, they can't, have the ability to go and do community activities, they don't have the money to go out and develop an identity. It's a way of keeping total control of someone. So it wasn't only controlling the flow of information, but by telling her that they had no money, it was also a way to keep her totally imprisoned and totally unable to develop any strength. If she had a sense of money, she might have also had a sense of freedom. She might have also had a sense of being able to leave, to get away from him, to escape him. If she had a sense of no money and no power, and emotionally she was really stripped of all of her identity, then it would put her totally under his control, which is real clearly what I think ended up happening with your mom. So I think you're right that your dad, in case he got a divorce, didn't want to know how much money he had. But I think even more, your father's whole instinct. To just completely control you. He used money and power to control you. He used money and power to control you, Eric, and he used it absolutely to control your mom. And I mean, isn't that really after all? Isn't that what it was about to him? I mean, wasn't it about the amount of absolute control and the ruthlessness in terms of just completely, almost being like an automaton who was focused on, I mean, it's like, do you think your father had any sense of what he even was doing to you? Or do you think that your father basically was so much on automatic pilot in terms of being focused on control and domination that did he not care? Or do you not know? What do you think? Eric, how about you saying something here? You haven't said a whole lot. What do you think?
I just don't like hearing it.
What does that mean?
I don't like hearing it.
You don't like hearing what?
I don't like hearing these things about my father.
What are you feeling?
Upset.
Yeah.
Hurt.
Sad. What?
Well, I pushed them out of my mind. And my father and my mother were two people that I love, and I just don't like that. It doesn't matter what they were or what they actually were. Whether it's a fantasy or it wasn't. They were very apparent in my mind before this and led up to the fact where I had no choice. I would have taken any other choice. Because I look back on it and realizing when people are worth and so on, I much regret it. I may not have had a choice at the time, but I regret it now. And I simply I like the image that I had from when I was 14 or so, where I had a mother and father that loved each other and loved me, and it was that kind of relationship. And I try to bring that back in my mind and pretend like it was like that, and I like that. and simple and deep. And I don't like hearing my father put in this sort of way.
It's too painful. Talk about it. I can't. Try.
He was somebody that I loved, and almost had no choice to do what I did. And I hate myself for doing it. And I understand why it was done when I came rationalized it. Because, because of the love that I had for my life, and how it was such a misconception of the family, no one else, and no one understood, and how having to listen to the fights, and simply the yelling and the screaming always taking place downstairs, and finding blood on the bed and different things. I just tried to rationalize it. And I break down every once in a while because it's really difficult. I love my father, and I'll never love anyone like him. And it's more difficult because of my mother, because I realize what an amazing tragedy of her life was compared to what it could have been because of my father. And I hate him for that. And I love him. And it was something that was beyond control. And
What was beyond control? Did you have to tell me?
eventually it had to happen. It was basically ruining my life and I guess lives. And it was putting another through torture. And it got to a point where he was amazing. I mean, he would do great things for me. And I wouldn't understand why. I know that she loved me. Somehow he just
Could never tell you for sure.
no.
I was there. I remember when your mom called me and told me that your dad was disinheriting you because he didn't like how you were behaving at the table. And he thought you weren't being respectful enough. But he couldn't tell you because he never talked about feelings and he wouldn't talk about feelings. And I remember telling you that, and you didn't even look that surprised. I mean, that must have been what your dad was like.
Well, I'm sad because I look back on my life now with my parents, and I wish it would have been so much more different. I look back and I wish that my mother and I would have had an extremely close relationship, and I would tell her everything that happened over. I would tell her everything. And all my relationships with different people and everything. She wanted to know, and I was raised that I couldn't tell her. That she couldn't express to me, and I wish I had a closer relationship with my father. Dreams that I have. And
You couldn't go see the one.
no, I just was in a good relationship. From an early age, it's just, I guess, we're taught to go follow that, but you don't
You just don't want.
have a close relationship.
You just don't talk about feelings and what's going on.
You keep it inside.
Did you ever try to tell your mom or talk to your mom about what your dad was doing?
No, I couldn't face that. I left that up to my brother. I couldn't face that. That actually I told my brother over the phone, and he handled. I couldn't. and I couldn't live with them anymore, and yet I love them. And I guess I was taught to love him because he was your father, and because I wanted to love him. And I guess that's why Bob cannot probably face the fact that my mother had to be killed. And really the only way out. And the only way out for her, and that's why he cannot even face it. And he knows that feeling about it, and he goes, if you would have to face that and understand that, it would kill you, because it's just so sad. And I don't know, in ways I'm pissed off that he was like it. In other ways, I'm glad that he made me such a strong person, but I really can't say whether I would have wanted another kind of father. I just wish the relationship would have been. And I don't. I mean, I have all kinds of things about it. And there was a dream where I had was trying to convince two of my friends to shoot me. And they wouldn't do it. No matter how hard I tried to convince them, so I took the gun that was in my hand and shot myself several times in the heart. And then I died. And there was a moment where it was just an immense pleasure. I was happy, and there was no tension on my mind, there was no stress, and everything was calm, and everything was great. And then I woke up in the morning and I was upset that I was alive because of the great feeling that I had when I was no longer alive.
What kind of feeling?
There was no oppression, and there was no more sadness to be had. And you no longer had to feel sad about your parents. And because it's just illness. And I guess one of the hard things about it is that everyone now, they don't know the truth, and they can't relate. And that's difficult.
You can't relate to any of the feelings you have.
Exactly.
There's so much pain, and you know, it's so clear that both of you are relating to not so much to the pain that you had in being in the family, although there was a lot of pain there. You both knew you could escape that. You were about to go away to school while you already were away, but the pain of knowing that your mother was going to be left behind and victimized, and that she was so defensive and protective of your father that even while she was being totally destroyed by him, that she was blocking absolutely even your love for her, and you're trying to help her, especially you, Lyle, well, trying to talk with her, that you were blamed for it. Here you were loving her and trying to care for her, and instead you got blamed for it, and there was an absolute denial of what was happening, and yet you knew the pain she was in. You saw her totally deteriorating, and I mean, it's almost like, I mean, your love for your mother was